Hi, my name's Bailey Hanna, and I'm the author of the Wells Ranch series. My newest release, At Wit's End, is out on December 2nd, and I can't wait to chat all about it today.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance in books where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Bailey Hanna. Bailey is a return guest to the podcast, and today we're heading back to Wells Ranch to talk about her latest book, At Wit's End, Book 4 in her incredible cowboy romance series. Today's conversation explores how trust, gentleness, and simply showing up can transform a family, a relationship, and even our self-perception. If you're craving a single mom cowboy romance with emotional depth, I have no doubt that At Wit's End is going to be your comfort read. And if you want to hear more from Bailey after this episode, cue up episode 8 of the show for our very first conversation, including her beautiful love letter. Bailey, welcome back to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be back. I jumped at that opportunity.
Oh, I love hearing that. Well, the last time we spoke, Change of Heart had just launched, and you were already setting us up for the next book in this series, At Wit's End. And I'm so excited that you're here talking about this today. So can you give us a little overview of this book?
So, At Wit's End is the fourth book in the Wells Ranch series, and it doesn't follow one of the Wells brothers, but it does follow one of the ranch hands on Wells Ranch, who's kind of like a brother. He's been around for a long time, and he's kind of the one that they always like to poke fun at a little bit because he's a bit of a goofball, and we love him for it. And then it's Blair from Change of Heart, her sister, who's a single mom to a 10-year-old. He's been causing her a lot of grief. He's getting into a lot of trouble at school. He's close to getting expelled. And so then finally it's summer break, but she's like, what am I going to do with this kid all summer? Because she still has to work and, sure, he's 10, but with how much trouble he's been getting into, she's like, he needs something to go do. And that something ends up being going out to Wells Ranch and kind of doing chores, hanging out with the boys, doing all of that stuff. And Colt is who ends up getting put in charge of this kid. And at first he's kind of like, what? Like, why do I have to all of a sudden, this 10-year-old who clearly doesn't want to be here, has never done any sort of ranch work before in his life. And now you want me to basically babysit him for the summer. But then they, of course, develop a super close bond. And it's because of that bond that then he gets closer to Whit and they become friends. And then eventually that turns into more, of course.
Oh, I love it. And I love how you set us up for this in the last book. And we got just little sprinkles of each of their personalities. So is there something about Whit that we don't know that we're going to be introduced to in this book? Because we've met her as Blair's sister, but obviously she has way more to her than that. So can you tell us anything about her as a character?
Yeah. So where Blair is very much the eldest daughter, the stereotypical eldest daughter, and she comes back to town and just takes over everything. Whit is much more of like the black sheep of the family. So her parents always put Blair up on a pedestal because she was the one who was doing really well in school and who moved away to go to university. And Whit didn't do any of that. And she was almost more like her son Jonas in that she was like getting into trouble as a teenager. And then he's 10 and she's only 29 turning 30. So she got pregnant right out of high school. And so she was kind of always the like troublemaker, quote unquote. And she's kind of carried that into adulthood still. So that's something that she has to grapple with a bit in the book.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you bring us into these real life scenarios, these real life dynamics, and we get to experience them in my favorite setting, Wells Ranch, and this cast of characters. So, what about Colt? Because obviously we've met him throughout the books and, he's just kind of the sunshiny guy in the background. Is there something about him that we don't know?
So Colt, this isn't a spoiler because I've said this online, but Colt has dyslexia. So there's dyslexia rep in this book, and that kind of comes up in also how he relates to Jonas, without giving any spoilers. But that's a big part of it. And the other big part of it is that his parents are still married, but he grew up in a family where his dad was away working a lot, and so his mom was almost like a single mom, right? He refers to her as being a married single mom at one point. So that also helps him relate to Jonas, and then also just makes him want to step up for Whit that much more because he knows how hard that is for her. So,
Oh, well, I'm so excited
yeah.
about the book
He's just a
already.
sweetie.
Yeah, I can tell. I can't wait to
Yeah.
learn more about them, but it's so interesting to me. One of the things that I love about this series that seems to be a little bit of a thread throughout the books is that when we think our story might have ended, the story's just beginning. So
Yeah.
the phrase I was thinking in my head is almost where we put a period, the universe is putting a comma and saying, oh no, the story's kind of just ramping up and getting started. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially in this age group that you're writing about, where some things have not turned out the way that we had hoped. And we have all of these responsibilities, all of these commitments. And what's the next thing, the next direction? And I think sometimes it can be really surprising. So I love that you're touching on that in this book. And that kind of brings me to the dedication. I love the dedication. Obviously, I've been seeing these things online and I saw a little quote from the book. And the quote from the book was, I am not enough and I am too much. Why would Colt think any differently? So, without setting you up even with a question, let's just dive into that.
Yeah. So that's really Wit's whole thing. And not to get spoilery for the people who haven't read an early copy of it yet, but there's a lot more going on that like Wit has had to deal with over the last 10 years. And that's all really just compounded. And then she also has this really crappy ex-boyfriend who's also like on top of her parents and the small town gossip and this ex-boyfriend who have all just really made her feel like that black sheep. And then there's, like I said, some other stuff kind of going on under the surface that her and Cole end up having to talk about. So yeah, she really just has felt that way. And Colt comes along and is like, no, you're wrong. And completely flips that for her. So
Yeah. I think that's such a powerful dynamic when we
mhm,
almost collide with those people in our lives who reveal to us that you're just a human being, right? Like it's not
exactly.
too much. It's real life and how
Mhm.
different that can feel and almost how shocking and alarming. And again, I have not read the book. I'm just talking about
Yeah.
in real life as adults. Sometimes it's almost more confronting when someone's like, "Oh, that's not a big deal. That's not the worst
Yeah.
thing. It's not something that would make me look at you any less," because we've almost been so programmed to shape ourselves around other people. So, does that come up at
100%.
all in the book? Is this an
Yes, yes.
easy transition for them, or does that sort of bring anything to the surface?
No, yeah, it's definitely not easy because it also kind of has him questioning a lot of things about, like, himself, and, of course, also his mom is as supportive as she is, she's like, "Hey, stepping into a situation where you're becoming a stepfather overnight to a 10-year-old who's been causing a lot of trouble and everything, that's a big thing to go from being a single guy with no kids or anything to this full-on family with a preteen who's so sassy too." Him and Odessa, I think, are neck and neck for who's the sassier one. So, yeah, it's a lot, but there's a few points where before she's kind of let go and been like, "Okay, maybe he does actually, like this, and he does actually want to be in the thick of it with me." There's one part where he's offering to help out in some way, and she's like, no, 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 like, that's too much. I'm not gonna ask you to do that. And he's like, you're not asking though. Like, I'm offering right now. So, like, it's fine. And there's a couple of those moments throughout the book where she kind of just has to be like, oh, you actually do just genuinely want to be here.
Oh,
So, yeah.
well, that's so relatable. And, even as someone
Yeah.
who's not in the life circumstance that Whit is in, I'm just thinking about that, just that offering of help and how self-conscious you can feel when you
Yeah.
want to accept that. And you almost feel like, well, I don't want to set myself up for failure. Or I don't want to make myself
Yeah.
vulnerable, or I don't want to seem like I need the help. All these layered things. And when
Exactly.
someone's just freely offering it, how challenging that can be, even though it seems like
Yeah.
it's wrapped in this perfect package. So, oh, I'm so excited to see their dynamic unfold, especially in the setting
Yeah.
of all of these other beautiful, healthy, nurturing, very realistic relationships that are sort of orbiting around them. Well, one of the other things that I was picking up from your social media is that this is a slow burn. And am I correct about that? First,
Yes.
okay, good.
Yes.
Good. Well,
Slow-ish. I'm
so
always so
ish.
hesitant to say slow burn because there's some people out here who is slow burn. They're like, I don't want anything.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
want them to kiss until like the last chapter of the book. And I'm like, well, it's not that. But yeah, it is in the like second half of the book
Yeah.
before anything like that happens. They definitely become friends first. And they're also both pretty hesitant to get into things because there's a 10-year-old involved. And
Yeah.
who finally has this like male role model, this positive male role model in his life. And Wit doesn't want something to happen that's going to like tear that away from him because he clearly needs it. And we do also see like a change in him over the course of the summer and into the fall that, like, of course, you wouldn't want to do anything to wreck that.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I think it's so interesting in books when we're watching people establish a foundation of trust and friendship and connection. And it is almost the antithesis to some of the media that we get bombarded with, where everything has to be explosive and over the top right away. And I think that it's so wonderful when there's room for that, when we get to sort of center the child, which I'm also hearing you kind of mention, of like his
yeah.
concerns, his safety, his needs, his emotional well being in this dynamic. And that it's not just the two of them, they're thinking of themselves almost as a family right off the bat and what is best for all
Yeah.
of us, which is really, really beautiful. So, Bailey, I've obviously been watching all of the social media that you've been posting about this book and picking up little like bits and pieces of everyone's personalities. And I saw some things that stood out to me. One,
Mhm.
that there's a little light femdom aspect to this relationship, which
Yes.
I definitely want to touch on. And then there was something else. There was almost like a slideshow of when she's a little mean and he likes it. So I want us to talk about these two things. First, can you give us a little information about the light femdom aspect of their relationship?
Yeah. So we've been lovingly referring to her as Dommy Mommy.
Oh, I love that.
She takes control. She knows what she likes, and Colt loves that. He's he's right in there. He's a golden retriever just all around. He's not I know there's lots of books and some people love that where he's a super golden retriever and then all of a sudden he switches and he's super dominant in the bedroom, and that is just not Colt at all. He's just down for whatever she wants to do always. He's eager to please, which I love that. So yeah, she gets a little bit, nothing too crazy. There's no pegging or anything super intense like that. Although I have said in my mind, if we were to jump a couple years in the future, I could see that for them because like I said, he's down for whatever she wants to try. And she's definitely leans into, there's a couple moments where they switch a little bit and he's gets a little bit more dominant for a second, but yeah, overall she's definitely the one in charge in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom too. Like,
Good for her.
yeah,
I'm all
no,
about it. I think that's great.
she knows what she
Yeah.
wants and yeah.
Well, the last time you were here, we talked about how Cassie was received
Mhm.
in Seeing Red and just how it can be a little confronting when we're witnessing a main female character have hesitation, have pause,
Yeah.
question someone's intentions, have a little, almost like an aura of self protectiveness, maybe a wall up, and how that translates, and how very often in the real world, we're almost not allowed to have that. I mean, how dare you
Mhm.
have a moment of pause about someone else's
Right.
intentions? So I always think it's really beautiful when we see it in a book and we almost get to experience that. And it's almost like modeled for us in a gentle way
Yeah.
of this is what it would be like if you were feeling really vulnerable and you didn't know if you could trust this person. But in a book setting, sometimes people can be very reactive to that. And I love it actually when there is those moments and the main female character gets to sort of, I don't even know if this is the right word, but almost vet her partner in that way of like, are you okay? Is this okay? And
Yeah.
maybe is a little self-conscious or rough around the edges or not all in right away. So for me, as I'm reading that, I'm thinking about what a blessing. It's almost an opportunity to be released from this forced perfectionism that gets thrown
Mm.
on women. And we get to just be a little, a little gritty for a second. So, what is that like to maybe write a character who is dealing with a lot of real world issues that your readers can relate to? And she's hesitant about this next phase of life or this person that's coming into her life.
Well, I love writing these I try to make them feel as real as possible. I mean, we talked about this last time, I think, where I'm just like, I want them to feel like real people,
Mm,
and real people aren't perfect. And I also think it's really interesting how if I were to write, especially with Whit being a single mom, and I think it's interesting that you brought up Cass because Cass is about to become a single mom, and yet
mhm.
she gets so much hate for having those hesitations. And granted, it's early when we're recording this, so we'll see what the reviews end up saying as we get
Yeah.
closer to release and then after release. But I haven't seen that same hate for Whit because so many people are like, she's such a good mom for taking care. And it's like, but they're both moms,
Yeah.
really. Like Cass is planning on having this baby by herself. So of course she is also trying to set that child up to be in a loving, nurturing environment. And she has so much reason to feel like
Mm,
Red is going to be a problem. Whit doesn't have a reason. She doesn't know Colt until he shows up the first day to pick her son up to take
yeah.
him to the ranch. But yeah, it's very interesting. We'll see, like I said, whether Whit ends up getting some hate for her hesitancy or if it just continues to be people talking about how she's such a good mom. But I just think it's realistic. As a mom myself, I'm married, but if I were to ever find myself single again, I would be so hesitant to bring somebody else into the picture. I would need to make sure that they were someone who was going to stick around for a long time. And she has that added pressure of knowing that Colt and Jonas have become friends
Yeah.
too. And so he's already in the picture, but how, like, should we take that step to explore our attraction to each other and our chemistry? Because what if that doesn't work out?
So, one of the things that we were talking about is this relationship between the three of them. It's not
Mhm.
just the romantic partnership, it's even the potential of developing a family. And
Yeah.
I was seeing something that you had shared in a recent Instagram post, and it was my favorite thing about this book is that the love and trust between Colt and Jonas is just as important, maybe even more than the love and trust between Colt and Whit. And one of
Mhm.
the things that stood out to me in that was the word trust, because sometimes that's not what we include in these dynamics in our real lives or even in books. So, can we drop into that space for a second and just talk about how trust is such a big deal in this book?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, Wit's ex, her baby daddy, he's a bit of a deadbeat. He's just kind of comes around when it's convenient for him, when he's single and thinks that maybe he can find himself back in Wit's bed for the night. Um, Not a great guy. When I started the book, I thought maybe we would have a redemption arc for him, and by the end, they could all be one big happy family, and then I quickly realized that was not gonna be the case. If anything, he just gets worse once Colt comes around. So both Whit and Jonas have dealt with the past 10 years of not being able to trust this guy. We don't trust that he's going to show up when he says he's going to show up, that he's going to do the things that he says he's going to do. And then Colt comes in and he does all of the things that he says he's going to do. Like if he says he's going to show up for them, he's going to show up for them. And even spoiler, there's a third act breakup, and even when they're broken up, he's still showing up for Jonas. Like, if Jonas needs him for something, he's still gonna be there because he's a man of his word. And so it definitely takes a lot for Jonas comes around a bit quicker, but yeah, it takes both of them quite a while to learn that they can actually trust him when he says that he's going to do things. And obviously, that's like super, super important for any relationship because whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, it's you need to be able to trust that person with everything. So, yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting also when we see someone step in and maybe not even consciously do it, but just through their energy, their actions, their commitment, healing wounds that they didn't cause, and
Yeah.
how powerful that is. And we can be a little resistant too when that comes because we just don't trust
Yeah.
it. But I think that you're touching on something really beautiful in this book that I think a lot of people are going to relate to, how important it is to honor those relationships. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because sometimes we're almost magnetically drawn to the painful relationship, the one that let
Yeah.
us down, because it's almost heightened, right? Like the
Yeah.
stakes are higher. We've got history, we've got 10, 15 years, we've got this. And
Yeah.
at every stage, those relationships have let us down, but because there's this deep investment, we almost keep going back to it. So it can be really alarming. And just speaking as a woman, right?
Mhm.
When someone walks into your life and all of the things that seem so challenging for this other person to do just seem to align for this new person. And
Yeah,
it's not the heavy lift that you've been told your life is. And I think that's
exactly.
right. Like that's really beautiful when we
Yeah,
see that happen. And I think I just love that you're shining a light on it because it's almost a really humble but powerful story that I think some of us need exposure to.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And Whit definitely goes through a lot of that, especially in the beginning of the book, because he is still coming around
Mm.
in the very beginning there. And that's what she's used to. And she doesn't, like you said, she's constantly just been told that this is all too much. And so then when Colt comes along and he's like, no, it's not. Like, it's not that hard to just like there's one very early on, I think it's like chapter 2. Um, she asks her ex because Jonas has gotten in trouble at school again. And so she asks him, like, can you try and have a conversation with him? And he's just like, I no, like, I don't want to do that. And then Colt comes along and he's having all sorts of conversations. He's taking Jonas fishing. They're having all sorts of like man to man talks and they're really like getting into what's been going on with Jonas. And she's just like, so why is it so easy for this guy who just came around a couple months ago to do that? But his dad for the past 10 years just can't be bothered. And that's really what it comes down to is he just can't be bothered. It's not hard. He just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it's necessary. So why do it? There's other things to do.
Oh, I think that touches on so many wounds that I think a lot of people
Mhm.
have, whether in their own
Yeah.
childhood, in their own I mean, you're talking to a generation that was
Yeah.
probably a lot of us were raised in complicated family dynamics, and it can feel like you're too much even as a kid,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Where you need too much or that's not my weekend. I don't have time for that, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting. And some people cannot relate to that. And I understand. I think it's beautiful if you don't relate to it. I think a lot of us do. and
Mhm.
how that sort of carries into adulthood. And so,
For
as you're
sure.
touching on these topics and reminding us that to have just uh, I say normal with quotes, but like a normal human experience with a wide range of emotions, moments when you're thriving, moments when you're flailing, all of those things are very normal. And so
Yeah.
when someone is not making that too much and they see the benefit of being in it with you, right? It's not just like
For sure.
return on investment, like I'm gonna get a cash bonus, but
No.
they get that connection and they really feel it and it's important to them. I think that makes people really stand out. And I'm feeling that in your characters,
Yeah.
each in their unique way, right? Obviously, everyone has like a different experience, but I think it's really beautiful, and I'm so excited that we get to see that. I actually feel like that part of this book might be the most healing things for people is when they reflect on
Yeah.
themselves as kids of like, "Oh, it wasn't too
Definitely.
much," right?
Yeah, yeah, as either kids who have been in Jonas's situation or kids who have been in Whit's situation because her parents were married and they were a happy, for all intents and purposes, family, but she always felt like her sister got more attention and she was always too much because she was getting in trouble or her grades weren't as good or she got pregnant, which for everyone who's read Change of Heart, they know that Blair did too, but they just made 2 different decisions with their lives, and she's been shamed for all of that, and then she's carried that into adulthood, and now she's trying not to do the same thing and have the same thing happen to her son, but because of who she accidentally got pregnant with when she was younger, that's still happening, and I feel like, yeah, a lot of people have been somewhere, right? At some
Yeah,
point in our lives, I think we've all been made to feel like maybe we were a little bit too much or we were not enough.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's so interesting. I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with another author, Catherine Bittner, and we were talking about how shame is so often the currency that women are expected to use to move through the world. Like we can do something or make a decision as long as we're ashamed about it, as long as we're feeling
Yeah.
bad,
Don't be too
then
proud
it's
about
okay.
it.
Exactly. And so I do think it's interesting when we're exploring characters a little bit later in life who are moving through that and who are just really standing in their power or standing in their truth, even if they don't feel powerful and just saying, this is what
Yeah.
it is, and I'm still showing up. I also think it's interesting how you brought us into this family dynamic with Blair and Whit and their parents because you've added another layer where
Mhm.
there's a loss, right? You know, their
Yeah.
mom, they're slowly losing her through the previous book. I'm not giving anything away if anyone's read the book, it's very
Yes.
much out there.
That's very
Um,
much the main theme of that book.
Yes,
Yeah.
but grief brings so much to the surface, and it's almost a very unwelcome mirror because it makes you look at the parts of your relationship with another person that perhaps hadn't come to fruition or hadn't healed or you hadn't gotten what you wanted from them. And I'm not even speaking about I'm just saying in general, that's what grief
It's
brings
so
up.
funny because you haven't read the book, but, like, you would
Am I giving
never
away
know that
spoilers?
because of the things that you keep, like, bringing up, and I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Sorry. I promise everyone,
Oh,
I
I
just
think it's
yeah,
great. Yeah, we're on the same wavelength here because definitely that's a
absolutely.
thing that Wit also grapples with
Mm.
is she, at one point she's like, "I wish that that I had had conversations with my mom about this, about the way that I felt growing up, so that I could maybe figure out what to do differently so that I don't do the same thing to my kid, basically." So, yeah, that adds a whole nother layer of feeling like you can't talk about those things. And like that probably would be so healing for her, but obviously that's just like not doable where they're at. So,
Yeah. And that's so relatable, which I think is the word I use so often when I'm talking about your books. I just feel like you're giving us this opportunity to drop into feelings that maybe we're not able to in our own stories. And I think that that's something really powerful about reading where we get to, the facts don't have to be the same, but I'm thinking about this journey through Wells Ranch and how each of the books has kind of invited us into this deep emotional space to ask the questions of what would I have done differently? What did I want to do? What did I want to say that I didn't say? and we still have time. It almost brings us back to what I mentioned earlier in the episode where we think there's a period, there's actually a
Yeah.
comma. Like we
Yeah.
still have time to do these things. So, oh, I think it just brings up so much food for thought, as we're
Mhm.
exploring these relationships. And I love that Colt, just from what I'm seeing, is so much more than what meets the eye, right? There's this
Yeah.
one thing that I keep seeing on social media too is just him talking about them in terms of binary stars. Can
Mhm.
you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so he growing up, again, married single mom, they didn't necessarily have a lot of money, so he talks to Whit about how when they were kids, that was kind of like their fun activity with his brother and his mom would be going out and like stargazing, and then he got into like learning about all of the stars, and so then he kind of brings that in, and yeah, and he teaches her a little bit about binary stars and how it's basically, to our eye, when you look up at the sky, it looks like one star, but they're actually gravitationally bound, and so that's how he refers to them, and yeah,
Yeah, I
I love
just
it so much.
going through emotions over here. Well, you
Yeah.
know what? It just it's so interesting because you think about all of the things that Wit's character has to do just to get through the day. I'm just imagining like,
Yeah.
single mom, she has so much on her plate, and Blair is a wonderful sister and all of those things, but it's still a lot. And then
Mhm.
to meet someone who walks with such tenderness and strength, that's what I'm getting from Colt's character, which is so beautiful. And I wish that for a lot
Yeah.
of us, right? Like I wish that
Yes.
for people reading this who feel like there's room for that in their own life and relationships. I think that's really beautiful. It almost reveals a part of you that doesn't get to step up to the plate sometimes when you're in survival mode, because I feel like there's
Yeah,
this difference between surviving and thriving, right? Like
for sure.
survival mode, I feel like I've been in that in so many moments of my life where
Oh,
I just like I got the list. The eldest
yeah.
daughter, Virgo, middle child is just gonna make it happen. And then there's so many different parts of our personality that are revealed when we get to just play or relax, or
Yes.
someone
Yeah.
else is picking up the thing and doing it for us. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, and
Oh,
he does bring a lot of that because he is also just a fun,
yeah.
goofy, so he brings a lot of that play back in, and now they're having just, like, fun and relaxed family dinners instead of her and Jonas sitting across the table not talking, right? So,
Yeah.
he brings a lot of that in, and then as they learn to trust him more, then it becomes something really beautiful and something that
Oh,
she deserves, like, she so deserves that. To just
yeah.
be able to just be herself for one, and not feel like she's too much or feel like she needs to be ashamed of any part of her personality. Even if he's, like, poking fun at it, it's all just in a really tender, loving way, and he makes that very clear. So, yeah,
What
we
does
all
that
deserve
feel
that kind of
We
love.
do, right? Like, I think you
Yeah,
and I are just nodding in the background.
yeah.
Obviously, no one's gonna be able to see all of that, but I think about that, and I'm wondering, what's that like for you when you feel safe enough to be the most you? Not the you,
Mhm.
the you that we're consuming, but,
Mhm.
like, what does that feel like for you inside? Because I think for some of us, we've not had that, and it's so important to talk about that, even a little podcast, right? To share
Yeah.
those stories of, like, what does that feel like when you feel safe enough to be seen as you are? So, I'm putting you on the spot, but what does that feel like for
Yeah.
you as a person?
I think at first it can be kind of scary.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, because it requires so much trust in another person
Yeah.
to be able to feel like you can act around them the same way that you act when nobody's around. And that is scary. But then once you kind of lean into it and learn that you can trust that and you feel safe in that space, then it's just so nice. It's so
Oh,
nice to be able to just take the mask off every once in a while and just be yourself without worrying about whether they're gonna judge you or anything. But yeah, but it is very scary at first, I think.
so Bailey, can you give us some information about when this is releasing and where we can find it?
So At Wit's End is releasing worldwide on December 2nd. You can buy it anywhere books are sold. And it'll also be available on audio the same day. We have Stella Hunter and Teddy Hamilton narrating, so that's really exciting. So yeah, you can buy it anywhere, which is also so cool.
Well, I'm so grateful that you came back and chatted with us. I loved our first interview, and I really recommend if you're a fan of Bailey Henna to go back and to listen to that interview. And then I just want to mention something I saw on social media recently is that there's another book in this series called
Yeah.
Love Wells Kept. Can you give us a little teaser about that book?
There sure is. A lot of people seem to have missed the memo that there's going to be a fifth book. But yes, there's one more book coming in this series, Love Wells Kept. It's about Kate and Jackson, who, if you've read the series, you know and love them. They've been married the whole time. They've been married for over a decade now, and they have two lovely little kids. Odessa, who is 8 in the book, and then Rhett, who is 3.5. And they have a very full life. And this is the part that a lot of people who do know about book 5, they seem to believe that it's going to be a prequel. And that is not the case. What actually happens is that there is an accident, and without giving too much away, Jackson suffers from a traumatic brain injury and has amnesia. And so he's forgotten everything and, well, almost everything, and has to start over. So it's the story of that. And it takes place about a year after At Wit's End.
So exciting. I actually love them and I cannot wait for this book. And I know it's not just the pure amnesia trope, but I love this because I think I love the idea of almost rediscovering your relationship with someone you've had a long-term relationship with. And I can say, as someone who's been in a very long-term relationship, that it changes and you learn more and you fall back in love. And so I really love that we're touching on this
Yes.
topic. Well, Bailey, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here with us. I really hope you come back and talk about Kate and Jackson's story so I can pick your brain. And hopefully, you and I will have better connectivity issues.
Yes.
We connect on an emotional level, but I would love if we connected like through Wi-Fi and electricity and things like that. So anyway,
Yeah.
come back soon, okay?
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.